Well, if you recall, back in October, we got the airplane back from a full engine overhaul, and so we've run the engine 60 hours since October. Today is April 1st, 2017, so we are 60 hours in on this newly overhauled engine. So what we're going to do today is an oil change. Now, we have been following the manufacturer, or I should say the engine overhaul shop recommendation for the oil change intervals on this new engine. And so we had an oil change at 10 hours, then 25 hours later we had another oil change done by the professionals down at our shop. That was at 35 hours total on the engine. So now we're 25 hours beyond that. We're at the 60-hour oil change. And this is the last oil change that we'll do on sort of the new engine schedule. So after this, we go to the regular, they recommend 35-hour interval oil changes from this point on. So we thought we'd go through the process of doing an oil change today. We've already taken the airplane out. We ran the engine. We went up and down the taxiway a couple times just to warm things up. So we're letting the oil drain back down into the oil sump now. And while that's happening, we're going to go ahead and talk about the items that we have assembled here in front of us here to do the oil change. So it's a pretty simple process. So what we have here for us to do the oil change is obviously we have oil. So the engine overhaul shop recommends this Phillips XC 20W50 oil. That's what they put in it from the very beginning on this engine, and that's what we're going to continue to use for the time being. So the Lycoming 0320 engine uses 8 quarts of oil, so we have 8 quarts of oil. The second thing here is a brand new Champion oil filter, and we'll replace our oil filter, and we'll talk all about that as we go through this process. We have a gas can that we use to collect the oil, and so that's a pretty easy process, a lot different than what we do in the car. There's a nice oil sump drain connection on the bottom of the engine, and we have this rubber hose that we're just going to connect to that port and run it down through the bottom of the cowling here and just drain the oil directly into this jug. So that's nice and clean and easy for that. To remove the oil filter that's already installed, we have a standard automotive type oil filter wrench. So that's pretty standard stuff there. Phillips head screwdriver. This is to remove the cowling, the top of the cowling. We've done this oil change ourselves a number of times in the past, and we found it's always easier to take the cowling off. Now, the professionals down at our shop that we use for regular maintenance, they are much better at this than we are. They're able to do the oil change with the cowling on, but for us it's easier, we can get to it better. We just pop the top of the cowling off, and it's just a series of Phillips screws to take that off. It's no big deal. So that's what the screwdriver's for. Let's see here. We have a safety wire pliers. This is a handy tool, along with the associated safety wire. This is for the oil filter. So on an airplane, we have to safety wire the oil filter back in place, and this is probably the most tedious and difficult part of this whole process, is to put this safety wire back on the oil filter. So we'll see how we do today. And let's see, we have a torque wrench. The oil filter has a specified torque that it's supposed to be tightened down. So we have a torque wrench, we have a 1-inch socket that goes to the fitting on the back of the oil filter. So that's to put the new filter on to the proper torque. And as a matter of fact, the torque is, you always wonder what is the torque spec on these things. And Champion is pretty cool. They put it right on the filter. And let's see, it says right here 16 to 18 foot-pounds. So that makes it nice and handy. We know exactly what we're doing with the torque. And of course, the standard stuff, we have some rubber gloves just to keep ourselves nice and clean, some paper towels, and this is a trash bag that we're going to use when we take the old filter off. We're just going to lay this out and let the oil drain into that from the old filter. Right. And that just keeps the whole engine compartment nice and clean. And then finally, once we get the oil changed, the old filter taken off, the new one put on, safety wired in place, we have this thing. This is actually a oil filter cutting tool, and the purpose of this is to take the old oil filter and you cut it open, and we're going to pull the element out of the inside of this oil filter, and we're going to take this magnet and we're going to go all across the inside of that oil filter element and check to see if we have any metal shavings or anything ugly in there that might indicate that there's something wrong with this engine. We don't expect that to be the case. You know, it's been running great, it's healthy, but it's a nice check to do. Now, the thing about this is an $8 or $9 tool from an automotive supplier, Racing. I think it was Auto Racing Supply website. $8 or $9. If you get the aviation version of this thing, they want 80 some bucks for this same tool to cut open an oil filter that's basically the same thing. Now, the only difference between the aviation version and this automotive version is our oil filter has this male fitting right here on it. So the automotive filter didn't have the hole, and the hole is to fit that male coupling in so you get a nice flat surface to run this across. So we bought the automotive one, we took it to my dad, who has all sorts of drills and drill bits and drill presses and tools and things. He drilled a hole in it for us, so we're all good to go there. So that's it. So everything laid out here, that's everything we need to do this oil change. So the next thing we're going to do is take the cowling off the top of the engine and start draining oil. Do you have anything to add to all that? That's a lot of work.
Well, probably just when you mentioned we took the airplane out to warm up the engine. And of course the question is, why do we do that?
Right.
The answer is because we've not done that before. And as we all know, oil when it is colder is thicker. So the usual debate people have is if you don't start the engine, all the oil sitting in the bottom, so when you drain it, you get more oil out, which is probably true. However, thick oil takes a very, very long time to drain out. And since we don't want to be at the airport all day waiting for the oil to drain, we want to warm up the engine, get the thinner oil, so we can drain it out in probably about 10 to 15 minutes. So that's right. Why we warm up the engine.
That's a good point. And this is 20 W50 weight oil, so it's pretty thick compared to automotive standards. This is a fairly thick oil. And it was kind of cool here overnight, so Brian makes a good point about that. Oil's thick. It would take a long time to drain if we hadn't done that, so that's the reason. Awesome.
So that's about it. I guess we can get started.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and take the cowling off and get this underway. All right. All right, so we have the cowling off the engine for easier access in there, and I have my rubber hose for draining the oil down into our jug. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into the jug there. Then I'm going to run this rubber hose up through the bottom of the cowling. Be careful in there not to poke anything. And we're going to go all the way up gently. This is one of these things you don't want to get in a rush. Let me run this a little bit further up. There. Now eventually I'm going to try to get my hand on it. There we are. Now you can see this nipple right here. That's the drain for the engine. Alright, so I'm going to just put our rubber hose over that. Just like such. And then as I press up on it, it's going to open. And I hear a snap, and it is open. Snapped open. The rubber hose is on there, and now the oil is draining from the engine down through the hose into our jug. So now's a good time to take care of some other chores, go to lunch, whatever. Let this drain out for a while, and we'll come back and finish up in a little bit.
Sounds good.
All right. Are we on?
We're rolling.
Oh. All right. So it's been, oh, I took my watch off. It's been 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And that's one of the benefits, like Brian said, of warming up the engine first. It doesn't take long for the oil to drain out. Now it's still draining. We still have the hose connected. So we're going to let that continue. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and take the oil filter off. I have my automotive oil filter wrench. So I just need to snip the safety wire that we put on last time. And get that off.
Okay, right in here.
Yeah. Actually, let me come out of that. So the purpose of safety wire is to make sure this filter doesn't come off or loosen, and it is effective, let me tell you. All right, so we have the safety wire loose. Now I'm going to come around and we're going to loosen this filter.
And the whole intent of the trash bag is to put under the filter against the engine block so that as it begins to loosen and the oil starts to drain out, that it doesn't get all over the engine compartment. So what I usually hold this side against the engine, and once it's able to be loosened by hand, then Brian will hold the other side and just screw it off.
That's right. And again, there's no rush in any of these activities. Take your time, make sure you're thinking through what you're doing. And that way you can avoid having to do it a second time or avoid an unnecessary mess. All right, so I'm holding the bag up tight here.
I am as well.
Very good. And the oil's just going to drain right into the bag. So I'm just going to loosen this off by hand. Here it comes. There goes the oil. Yeah, without the bag, that would be making a terrible, terrible mess in the engine compartment. Of course, if we poke a hole in this bag, that will also make a terrible mess.
That's true.
In this engine compartment. So let's not do that. Continuing to turn this filter. It's a lot of threads. There we go. Feel like we're doing surgery here. We've done an oil filterectomy. All right, so that is loose. So we have oil that is continuing to drain from the housing the oil filter goes. So I'm gonna...
Here, I'll hold the bag if you want to get the new oil filter.
That's great. Yeah, you'll just hold that right in place. You got it?
I have it.
Okay.
Now, before we put that on, we still have to take off the old wire.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this is one of those jobs where you could do it yourself, but an extra set of hands is always helpful.
Absolutely. The more the merrier when it comes to these things. All right, I'm going to get in here and snip this safety wire. It just fell into the bag. That's perfect. tiny tag of wire left that I need to pull loose, and that's done. So before we put the new filter in place, Brian, if you still have the position for it, I'm going to go ahead and put the new wire in place. So it'll be ready for us.
Sure.
There's a special hole right there in the housing just for the purpose of the safety wire. Okay, just leave that right there. Got the new filter. Just clean this housing off a little bit. It actually looks okay, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
All right. Just put a little bit of oil on this new gasket here.
And you'll find when looking at an engine, it's just not the oil filter that has the safety wire on it. From where my head is, I can see two others right now. So it's really anything that could turn on an engine that they safety wire down.
Absolutely. All right, Brian, I'll take this side of the bag. We are still dripping, so we have to be careful. And I'll put the filter in place here and tighten it up by hand. And that should stop any dripping that we have.
You want me to wipe off the bottom of the housing before you do that?
Sure. That's fine. Great. All right, I have hand tightened the filter, which has stopped any drips that we have.
Okay.
Now we'll just pull the bag out with the oil that's drained into it very carefully. I think I probably have more room over here, right?
I think you do.
Yeah. Just kind of keep that closed up. We'll lift that over. There's a bag of oil right there. So that's it. Next thing we're going to do is just torque this up to the specified torque using our torque wrench. Do that. All right, so we have our torque wrench. I'm just going to set it here. The specification is 16 to 18 foot-pounds. There's 15 right there, 16, 17, 18. Let's do 17. That's kind of in the middle. Seems like a reasonable torque. All right, so we're just going to put this on. We've got a 1-inch socket, which matches the 1-inch fitting on the back of the Champion oil filter. Nice and convenient. And we'll just give this a little torque, taking our time. And there's the click. So that is properly torqued at 17 foot-pounds. Right, so the next thing I suppose is going to be the safety wire. I'm going to have to come to that side of the aircraft for that. So the most tedious part of this whole thing is the safety wire on the oil filter. So we put the oil filter on, We've got it here. We used our torque wrench and we torqued it down to a measured 17 foot-pounds of torque. And that's right in the range between 16 and 18, which is specified by the champion people. So I have also threaded my safety wire through the hole that's provided on the engine for the purpose of the safety wire, and I've got it pulled to length to the point on the top of the oil filter here where the safety wire is going to twist in. And one thing I've learned by doing this a few times is the safety wire does not get a whole lot shorter when you twist it. You kind of expect that it would, or I would have expected that. But as I've done this a few times, turns out it doesn't very much at all. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp the safety wire pliers onto my wire right here at the length that is just very slightly longer than the spot where it's going to end up connecting. And now I'm going to need to squeeze these together and lock that tool down. Now we can twist. And this is 32 thousandths safety wire, and they say that we need to twist this size of wire until we have 6 to 11 twists per inch. So I'm just going to begin twisting until it looks like we have about that. And the idea of twisting the wire, this is a stainless steel wire, and the act of twisting it changes the molecular structure in the surface of this wire. I guess some people call that annealing the wire. It makes it harder and stronger. So that's why we twist it. And I've got it twisted a number of times here. That looks like a reasonably comfortable amount of twists per inch. Again, the spec on this kind of wire is 6 to 11 per inch. That length looks pretty good. I'm going to disconnect my pliers and run one end of the wire through the hole in the oil filter that's designed for that purpose. And then we'll finish snugging up the wire. Now the first few times I did this did not go well, and we had numerous attempts to get the correct length of wire once we got everything in place, and it was just painful. But as we've done this a number of times, we've gotten it to be a little bit more easy. I think I actually want to run this through the other way. Pull this back out again. Not a big deal. I'm going to run that from the back. It's going to make that work better. There we go. Use my pliers. Pull that through. Looking good so far. There we go. That is snug. I'm going to walk around to the other side of the airplane so I can put my pliers on those pigtails and do the last little twist, and the safety wire will be done on the first try even. Again, that was not always the case. The professionals would have had this done 10 minutes ago, but we're doing just fine. Okay, just going to trim the end of this off and curl it around. So when we're doing pre-flight inspections in here, we don't poke our fingers on this sharp wire. I'm just going to make a nice little circle on the end, and that'll be the oil filter done. Okay, the wire is in place in such a way that any sort of counterclockwise rotation of this oil filter in the loosening direction will pull against that wire, and the wire will keep it from doing that. So the oil filter's in.
That's great. So at this point, the new oil filter's on, and we just have to disconnect the oil drain tube, pull it back out from the belly of the airplane, and try not to make too much of a mess.
Don't forget to pull down on it to snap that shut too.
That's right. So you pull down an arm, you hear a little click, so now seal itself back up.
Sounds good, Brian.
And here comes your direction.
All right, I'll slowly pull it. That is loose, nice and clean. We didn't spill anything at all in the engine cowling.
Or in my hand in the process.
Or on your hand either, right? So that's great.
Let me borrow that paper towel. I'll just towel off the bottom of that quick drain.
Very nice.
Once again, just confirm it's all the way down. So we're good.
So we drained the oil. We have taken off the old filter. We have put on the new filter to the proper torque. We put on the safety wire. And so the next thing to do is put oil in the engine.
The most important thing to do is put the oil back in.
That's the important thing to do.
And the second most important thing we'll do is make sure it's not coming back out somewhere else.
Right.
So, all right. I can have one of those. All right, so now it's time to put the oil back in the engine. So you just want to take the oil dipstick off. I clean it as I pull it out, so we don't get a drip elsewhere on the airplane.
Here, I'll hold that for you.
And they were looking to put 8 quarts back in. So I figure what I'll do is probably put 7.5 quarts back in. We could take a measure and see how it looks. Now, for these oil containers with the caps, they all seem to have these little rings on them. And one thing I try to make sure of is that as I take the cap off, that it stays with the cap. I see a lot of people that take the cap off, and sometimes that little plastic piece stays around in here, and they dump the oil container into the top of their engine. And the biggest concern is if you pull that back out and the cap has disappeared, that means it's now somewhere in your engine, and you hope you can get it back out. If not, you got to take the engine apart. So always make sure that these little safety caps are somewhere else besides in the engine. We've determined filling these that for this particular oil filler tube, as long as you take your time and you're careful, an oil funnel doesn't really do much to prevent the mess. So we just take our time and get 1 quart in at a time.
And we've probably said this at least 10 times through the course of making this video. Take your time. You know, if you don't have enough time to do this job, it's probably not a good time to do it. So pick a time when you're not pressed for, scheduling issues or whatever. Because if you get yourself into a rush, you're going to make a mess. You're going to forget something. So take your time. Do everything deliberately. Think about what you're doing, just like anything with an airplane. And you'll end up with a good job done and no mess to clean up. So that's the whole idea here.
We might want to mention for any new viewers that, of course, we both own this airplane, and oil changes are certainly one of those items that are an owner available maintenance item.
That's right. We are not aircraft mechanics by any stretch, but we could do this. We can do various things with the tires. We check our own air in the tires. There are other things you can do with tires and things like that. But the oil change is kind of the biggest deal when it comes to owner pilot maintenance that you can do yourself. And you can and we will log this in our aircraft engine logbook to show that the oil was done We're going to do a run up on the engine to check for leaks, make sure everything's tight, none of the oil is coming out, and we're going to write that right in the logbook, right with our pilot certificate number. It's going to be official, so we are able to do that legally as pilots and owners of the airplane. It's pretty cool.
So I think we're what, three quarts in now?
That is a third quart right there.
So at about this point, this is enough oil to begin accumulating in some volume in the bottom of the oil pan. I like to just double check the oil drain now at this point, so I'm not pouring engine oil into the top of the engine and having it drain out the bottom and onto the floor. So Brian's just going to check that for me to make sure it is sealed and we're not leaking on the other side.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an off-camera move there, but that was a good idea. I went around there and I checked that, and it is dry. So all the oil is staying in the engine where it belongs. Back after all the work was done, there was really no appreciable oil consumption. So I think the engine broke in the first little bit of time that it was on the test stand at the engine overhaul shop. So we never really had any appreciable oil consumption at all, which is fantastic. So that's a little bit of a tip of the hat to Zephyr Aircraft Engines down in Zephyr Hills, Florida. They did a really nice job on this engine overhaul for us. Speaking of Florida, we mentioned earlier, today is April 1st, and tomorrow we are going to head out in this airplane and go down to Florida for Sun and Fun. That begins on the 4th of April. So we're going to go down tomorrow the 2nd and have a couple days in Florida to enjoy ourselves before Sun and Fun. Then we're going to go there and enjoy ourselves even more. It should be a good trip. And from where we are here in North Carolina, that's probably going to be about 4.5 hours of flying to get from here down to in the Lakeland, Florida area where Sun and Fun is. And that's going to be probably one fuel stop, fuel for the airplane and fuel for us too. We'll get some lunch. We're actually looking at St. Simon's Island, Georgia, as a fuel stop and lunch stop for us. We've never been there. It looks like a neat place, so we thought we'd check it out for a couple hours. And a lot of nice restaurants to walk to from the airport.
Right, very close and convenient.
Long cross-country trips like that require a lot of flight planning, and I like to consider a good place to stop for lunch part of the flight planning.
Well, fueling the pilot is always a good idea. So how many of these are we up to?
All right, the one in your hand is 7. That is 7 quarts.
I don't know about anybody else, but as you're sitting here pouring quart after quart after quart, you just lose count. So one thing that you saw when we began the video was that we took out all the quarts that we're going to use just for this oil change instead of leaving it in the case. Because we want to make sure that we're only putting in no more than 8 quarts. Whoop, there's our first mess.
That's no big deal. I tell you what though, if that's the biggest mess we make in this, I think we will call it a success. So the pilot's operating handbook for this airplane and this Lycoming engine recommend operating the engine between 6 quarts and 8 quarts of oil. So we've just put 7 quarts of oil in the engine. So why don't we stop there?
Sure, take a read at the gauge.
Yeah, we'll pull the airplane out of the hangar. We'll start the engine, run it up for a couple minutes, come back, make sure we don't have any oil leaks, and we'll also check the oil level at that time to see if we might need to add a little bit more, or maybe it's going to be okay there with 7. So we'll see.
It sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
Put the oil dipstick back in.
Clear prop.
All right, let's get the counting.
Okay.